My humble respect to Guru Mahan, Guru Piran Sivasankaran, Guru Piran Neo, fellow Jnanis. Today I'm going to cover a very important topic, which Swamiji speaks about in chapter 13 of the I God book. He speaks about a plan for world peace. And one needs to understand the context when Swamiji wrote this. He wrote it in the time when in the night he went through World War II, World War I and World War II. There was a lot during war. There's a lot of challenges, particularly in the First World War and Second World War. And Swamiji's perspective is that why do we have war? And moving forward, if you see, this is in the 1940, 1939, and up to 1945. But since then, we have had so many conflicts, so many wars. Now we have a big war going on in Europe. So somehow human beings have not learned to be peaceful among one another. And when I covered the earlier part of human evolution, you see that human beings were always in tribal forms. They had tribal, they were lived in tribes, and there was continuous war and fighting and, all kinds of, things that people used to do to themselves. And this tribal culture still continues, and particularly competition for land, water, resources. And when you have scarcity of that, people, behave very differently. So in this, Swamiji says that we human beings are supposed to be the most intelligent. We are thinking, of all the species, we are the ones that think. We have the ability to think and rationalize. But yet we are the species that is always at war, always causing a lot of calamities. In spite of all the development and modernity, we seem to be, contributing so much negativity and harming nature compared to all other species. And how is it that we can attain world peace if we ourselves are not at peace? Right? So the world is a very challenging place when there is no peace. And if you take a look at what's happening in Europe, take a look at many countries that are got civil wars, the people suffer. There is no food, famine, disease, lack of security. So how do we, in the context of spirituality, in a state of enlightenment, how do we attain a more peaceful place? And this is where Swamiji's teachings are very important, and so are all the other great saints and sages. So we see that the world has many, many challenges. In spite of all the developments, the world has, more newer challenges. We solve something, we have, more challenges. So this Millennium Development Goals essentially maps out all the challenges that human beings go through. The first one is sustainable development and climate change. Climate change is real. We see that climate change is starting to change the weather patterns. We're seeing a lot more flooding. We're seeing a lot more drought. We're seeing a lot more fire. We're seeing a lot more the heat, temperature going up. As the temperature goes up, new forms of diseases are coming. So we're starting to see that in spite of all the development, our human activity is causing, issues related to developing in a sustainable way and climate change. We also have issues related to clean water. Many parts of the world don't have clean water. People used to take it from the river, but the rivers are all contaminated, right? The other issue is on food security. As you can see that, one of the key issues is that, lack of food. Now with the war happening in Ukraine, and we see the lack of grain and lack of, that impacts the whole global community. The other issue is population. Population is growing so fast that there's not that we lack the resources to support the population growth, particularly in a lot of underdeveloped and developing countries, right? Democratization, many societies want to give people voice, but in many places, people don't have the voice. So they are, suppressed. They are, there's slavery. There's all kinds of people don't have a voice, and in many parts of the world, the conditions are very difficult. The other issue is actually global foresighting and decision making. A lot of changes are happening. We are unable to predict those changes. A lot of volatility that is happening. We are unable to make decisions. We see that recently with COVID, we don't know what's happening in the early part of the COVID. And people are afraid. Companies just, stopping. A lot of the supply chains came to a screeching halt. People are losing jobs. People are really not sure, and there's a lot of stress. And as people are losing jobs, unable to pay mortgages, unable to look after their family, it became very difficult. It was very difficult for governments to make decisions. The other one is that we see a lot of converging technologies taking place. While convergence are very important, we see that convergence also disrupting our way of life. We see that technology is taking over and many people are losing jobs, but they have not upskilled themselves. So we see mechanization is taking away lots of jobs because people don't have the skills to operate. And recently I was talking to someone where a factory that was producing shoes laid off close to 600 people because they went to automation and the people could not find jobs. So these are changes that are happening in society that is causing a lot of challenges. The other aspect is actually we see that the gap between the rich and the poor are increasing. The rich are becoming more richer and the poor are getting more poorer. With the climate change and also in many developing countries, we're starting to see zoonotic diseases, new diseases coming, COVID, SARS, now the monkeypox. So many diseases are emerging, and that's one, infectious diseases. We also have non-infectious diseases, or what we call non-communicable diseases, with an explosion of diabetes, obesity, a whole range of other heart diseases. So in spite of all the modernity, we still have a lot of new diseases emerging. We also have education and learning is very important, but not everybody gets access to quality education, and training. Many rural, poor communities, underdeveloped countries don't get access to the education and training, hence unable to secure stable, good jobs. We also have peace and conflict. There's a lot of conflict going on. As I mentioned earlier, the war in Europe, but there's also a lot of, disharmony in countries where people focus so much on race and religion, and there's a lot of major challenges in terms of social harmony and social cohesion. The other aspect is status of women. Many women are discriminated in the workforce. There's a lot of issues of sexual harassment, but there also are issues related to women don't have the same opportunities as men in many countries, don't have access to education, employment, and so on. And many of them don't have access to healthcare. And we see that, many of them succumb to, abortion and a whole range of illegal abortion and other things that impact women's quality of life. The other aspect is we also see a lot of transnational organized crime like money laundering and others that destabilize the economy. Energy is a big issue, energy crisis. We saw the price of petroleum and other energy go up. That raises the cost of living. But we also have, energy that pollutes the environment. So we have carbon footprints increase that causes global warming, and it has a knock-on effect on food systems, flooding, raising of the sea levels, and zoonotic diseases, and so on. We also see a lot of science and technology that is rapidly developing. Some of it is good, some of it is not so good. The good part is that we are able to discover better cure for diseases, better way of managing our, various way of life. But we also see that science and technology could also be harmful, particularly if they are used for war and other things that have an adverse impact on society. Global ethics, we're starting to see a lot more people with money laundering, transnational crime, and so on. So a few years ago, the global community came and said, look, these are the 15 global challenges of society that we need to solve. And to be able to solve these issues, we need to address, how they impact the socioeconomic, environmental aspect of society. So they came up with the Sustainable Development Goals. Poverty was a big issue. How do we solve, so the Sustainable Development Goals, it follows up from the Millennium Development Goals of no poverty, no zero hunger, good health and well-being, quality of education, gender equality, clean water and sanitation, affordable and clean energy, decent work and economic growth so that people have jobs, industry and infrastructure, industry innovation and infrastructure, reducing inequality among people, races and religions and communities, ensuring our cities are sustainable and green, and it builds sustainable communities. The other one is responsible consumption and production. We are so much in this consumption era. We consume so much resources. Looks like we need a second planet at the rate we are going. Unfortunately, we don't have planet B. So if we destroy things in this current planet, we are in for difficulties. Climate action, we have climate change that is disrupting all our weather patterns, and that's impacting our food systems, our healthcare systems, and so on. Life below water, we have our seas and our ocean. We are contaminating and polluting our seas and oceans. We have a lot of microplastics that are being eaten by fish, and that is ending up in our own food and causing all kinds of health problems, metabolic issues, and also cancer and others. Life on land, we are cutting down a lot of trees, and we are disturbing our biodiversity and our natural resources. And we are also encroaching into other animals' habitat. And we're starting to see the new viruses that are in the animals are coming into the human beings and causing a lot of problems. The 16th goal is actually peace, justice, and strong institutions. In many countries, there is no peace, there's lack of justice, and also the institutions are very weak. Hence, many countries suffer. So part of the Sustainable Development Goals is to ensure peace, justice, strong institutions. And this can only be done if we have strong partnerships to address these goals. And these make up the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which actually Swamiji speaks about in the book. He speaks about agriculture, controlling population explosion, ensuring clean water. So when I read Swamiji's book, I saw the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. He says, if the world is to attain peace, we need to ensure all these are addressed. When you have poverty, hunger, you see people rebel. We have all kinds of social and other problems. So spirituality is not just sitting down and meditating. Spirituality is about, in that meditation, one gets the clarity of thoughts. In the clarity of thoughts, one understands human existence and life. And when one understands the human existence and life, one is able to look at the challenges that impacts humans and in our way of life, and how do we find solutions to ensure that we're able to overcome these challenges, not only for ourselves, for our families, but for our communities, our countries, and the global community. So part of spirituality is to be that extension of being aware, being enlightened of the way of life, and attaining an enlightened life. As it's beautifully stated in the Advaitic and the Hindu philosophy, that Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. How do we acquire a mindset that is dharmic in the sense that it is so powerful to overcome the challenges of life and is able to find solutions, problem solve the 17 sustainable development goals? You see, so a dharmic mind that is addressing the sustainable development goals in an enlightened way. When one is able to do that, the dharma transform into artha. Artha means wealth. Is able to generate the 10 capitals that overcomes poverty, no hunger, feeding everybody, giving everybody good health and education, ensuring gender equality, women are treated, in the best possible way, ensuring clean water and a whole. So the whole 17 sustainable development goals can be attained if one is able to have that clarity of thought and enlightening and illuminating way of problem solving. So here Swamiji speaks about this, attaining more peace is how do we overcome some of the scarcity of resources and so on. So where does the peace start? All this is great at the global level, but where does it start and how does it start with all of us? And if you see very clearly that something that Swamiji speaks about is that we all are often thinking about ourselves and our family. It's quite interesting that when a householder has a family, maybe he has one son, and and he may be a very wealthy person, and oftentimes when they pass on, they pass all the wealth back to that one child, but unknowing that all the wealth that they generated were from society. They get all these resources from nature and society, and society, they are business people, society are the ones that buy and support them. But ultimately, when the wealth they accumulate all that wealth, they give it to that one child, as opposed to, distributing it to the broader society, seeing everybody as their child. You see, so somehow that human mind is unable to expand, right? And this is what Swamiji speaks about. You see, if Swamiji acquired this knowledge of self-realization, if he had kept it to himself, he could be, very wealthy. But he took this message to across the globe, giving everybody, this knowledge for free, the Kundalini meditation and others. Today, we see many people now have productized meditation, productized all these things. And you've got, if you want to get the Diksha or if you want to learn this, you have to spend thousands of dollars in a nice hotel room to get this knowledge. But this Mahan did not do that. When he discovered it, he made it free for everybody, gave access to everyone on how to practice this, meditation. So here, so the peace, if we want peace in the global community, somebody starts off with, it has to start with the individual. The peace needs to start at the individual level. When we are at peace, we see that when our lens is recalibrated to the peaceful, the universal peace sanctuary in ourselves, we see that everything that we see, everything that we cognize is peaceful. And similarly, if our individual self is very selfish, very negative, you see that that's percolated in the family, that's percolated across society. So here Swamiji says that the individual peace, has an impact on the family. If the individuals are not peaceful, it is hard to set up an institution or called family that is peaceful. If there is a lot of conflict in the individual, that conflict will transmit it to the family too. So we see that, that link between the individual, indivisible, individual, infinite. So when they carry that mindset, we see that that percolates in that family. And that family, when the family unit is strong, when the family unit is spiritual, when the family unit is more and more altruistic, we see that, that percolates in the community. Now from that one person, that three persons become, from one you multiply by three if you have one child, or maybe if you have two children, that's four, and so on. So that DNA gets imprinted, whether positive or negative. And the family makes up the community. And you see that when family is healthy, and if every family is healthy, you see that the community becomes very healthy. You see, when you see that on a weekend, a family goes around picking up the garbage, doing gotong royong. After a while, you see that the community also will do the same thing, But if the individual and the family keeps throwing garbage, everybody else is going to do it, and you're going to see a community is going to suffer. So Swami talks about the peace starts, with the individual, the family, the community level, and then at the nation level, right? So we see that the peace then starts at, that percolates all the way from the individual. When the communities are healthy, the communities are harmonious, the communities are working together, it percolates to the country level. And when the countries are peaceful and harmonious, we have global peace. But all this, is spoken about, peace doesn't happen naturally. It has to be, human beings tend to be often very self-centered and selfish. But if one, to understand the individual, if one takes a spiritual approach, that individual is shaped by the spiritual identity, which is they're taught to introspect, contemplate, reflect, and meditate. That spiritual compass that they get, the wind, that spiritual wind of the Bhagavan's Gita, that the mind is resonating, that resonation drives individual peace, and that individual peace leads to family peace and harmony. It leads to community service, altruism, and that drives peace and harmony. People don't see themselves and their family as the most important thing. There's an expansion, that universal identity starts expanding to the community that they're living in, the sense of service and sense of the peace that I get, the knowledge that I get. I want to be able to not just share it with my family, but to the greater community. And you start seeing that when that happens, that percolates at the national level, taking each community and sharing this, and helping solve poverty, the 17 SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, not just meditating, but that meditation, that introspection, contemplation, reflection gives that clarity that Swami says, Telivan and Nila. When the Telivan and Nila comes, the clarity comes, they're able to say, okay, how do I solve the problems of society? How do I make things better, not only for myself and my family, but for society? So we sense a sense of community, friendship, and fellowship that brings peace and harmony. And if that percolates across the different communities in the country becomes more harmonious, more peaceful, values the 17 SDG goals to ensure no poverty, nobody is left behind, good education, access to good technology, green technology, environmentally friendly technology, and so on. So we see that, but that requires a spiritual lens, right? So sustainable development doesn't happen without a spiritual lens. To understand that nature, for us to harness the power of nature and not exploit and abuse nature. This notion of planetary health, the health of the people depends very much on the health of the people, the planet. If we don't look after Mother Nature, we'll see that we pay the consequences. And COVID is an example of how we are paying the consequences. So if you see in terms of peace, it starts with that individual spiritual compass that we all have, which nature's embedded in us. Unfortunately, we choose a compass that is so materialistic, and sometimes we become very self-centered and selfish. And ultimately, it has an impact on our family life. It has an impact on the communities. We have very intolerant communities. There's a lot of conflicts, and you see that the nation becomes very, very, disharmonious, and there's a lot of suspicion. And that can cause a lot of problems, including global peace. So here Swamiji speaks about how one has to start with the individual self to discover the universal peace sanctuary and percolate that across the globe. So here Swamiji says, a man is superior on account of his superiority in knowledge and morality. And knowledge and morality, or jnana and discipline, comes through that deep introspection, contemplation, reflection, and meditation. Those four words, I hope, will continuously resonate in you so that you're able to discover your spiritual compass and use that spiritual compass to guide you, and always hold on to it so that you don't get distracted from your own enlightened way of life. The dharma, artha, kama is actually to be able to achieve all your aspirations and goals in life in a divine way. And that's what the spiritual compass guides us. And the karma is not about, some say, well, we've got to get rid of desires. No, we have to divinize our desires. If we divinize our desire, then the last part is that we attain moksha, an enlightened life, enlightened, family life, enlightened professional life, enlightened community life, and ultimately help enlighten others and live in a very enlightened world. So we see that we have that greater intelligence and knowledge, but we've got to utilize that and continuously harness that. If we did that, if all of us did that, we see that attainment of world peace could be, very easy. The only thing is that we have a very small minority that do this and take it all the way to, the highest level. Most people will do it for themselves and their family, but very few will commit the time or the resources for the greater community. And there are even smaller group that will, a smaller fraction that will do it for the country. And finally, there is the percentage that stand out globally, like Mahans and the Mahatmas and the Nelson Mandelas and the Mother Teresa's and the Albert Einsteins and others that step beyond to discover the full potential that creates world peace. So the question is that a true disciple, a true devotee, is the one that essentially is devoted to the divinity in nature that is within us, around us, and be able to harness the full power of nature, not just for themselves, family, their community, and for society. And if we did that, you see that we are conscious of this. We're able to then influence policymakers. We're able to, if enough people do this, then you see that governments, start, making the right decisions. So, and here Swamiji says, what should governments do to ensure that society attains world peace? Of course, birth control and population growth is very important. The earth can only support so much people, right? And if people are living longer and you have more children, you see that the population is going to grow significantly, and the earth does not have enough resources to support everyone unless we find better ways of doing this. So again, if we want world peace, we need to be able to manage our population growth. And value-based development, we need to focus on values, the good values, the values that will essentially ensure that planetary health, we look after people, we look after the planet, we look after, so a set of values that drives our development, and not profit maximization, but purpose maximization. The other thing is that, as I mentioned, health of the planet and the people are tied together. If the planet is not healthy, people will suffer. Also providing access to education to everyone, irrespective of race, religion, and so on. The fifth element is diplomacy and friendship between people and nations. This is very important. But if we don't have individually cultivating this diplomacy and tactfulness with our family, with our community, with our friends, it's hard to achieve that. And it starts with the individual. The other aspect is we need to create wealth in the most sustainable way and not exploit nature. And in the process, find ways to overcome hunger, food. And Swamiji in this chapter gives a lot of time for agriculture. And today we see that, you know, the scarcity of food because of climate change that impacts our food systems, our agriculture, has an impact on all of us because we are paying a higher price. In some countries, water security, we need to ensure water is managed properly. There's no pollution. And that requires, better ways of doing things. This is where science, technology, innovation is very important. And we also, governments and people need to come together to ensure safety and security of our way of life, which means the safety of our food systems, safety of our environment, safety of threats from, unscrupulous and, people that want to profit maximize or exploit others. So again, that safety and security is very important. And the last one is, as I said, diplomacy among friendship. Diplomacy is really important. So this is what drives world peace. Swamiji speaks a lot about this in this. And if we did all this, we see that attaining that 17 sustainable development goals will be a reality, from no food right up to global partnerships. And we see that this is the only way that we're able to manage our scarce resources, manage it efficiently, make sure that nobody is left behind in this development agenda. And if we did this, we see that we're able to achieve world peace. And it starts off with discovering the universal peace actually in all of us. And this is what Swami says. Every day you meditate, every day you introspect, you find new solutions, new way of doing things, that you do it yourself, with your family, with the shared, with the community, and most importantly, to the policymakers and others in our society, to help them make that transition to a more sustainable and peaceful world. So this is what this chapter is about. Spirituality is not about just sitting down and shock sindiri, getting a nice feeling for yourself and enlightening feeling. How do we then utilize it into our day-to-day activities, like all the Mahans and other great saints and sages, to say, how do we live a very harmonious and peaceful life? This is what spirituality in action that my guru taught me. Sandosham. Thank you very much.